Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Easy Agile webinar, Tools and Tips for Easy Remote PI Planning. Thank you so much for joining us today, wherever you are around the world. We are Easy Agile, and my name is Sean Blake. I'm the Head of Marketing here at Easy Agile. And today we are joined by Tegan Harbridge, our Product Manager, and also Jasmine Iordanides, who's our Product Marketing Manager at and it's fantastic to be able to speak with you today. We look forward to hearing your questions and running you through a few different things around PI planning. Well, what a time we're living in at the moment. Today, things look very different than they did 6 months ago, don't they? And it's posed a lot of challenges for our team here. We are an Atlassian Marketplace partner. We have 4 apps on the Atlassian Marketplace, and our apps are made to make Agile easier in Jira. And today we're going to be talking about PI planning, specifically in Jira, but also more generally. And we've prepared a few tips to run you through. And we've also got a few specific interactive tips about how to make PI planning easier in Jira using Easy Agile programs for Jira. So we hope that you find this webinar useful, and we look forward to speaking with you more about it both during this session and also afterwards. If you do have any questions along the way today, feel free to post them in the chat tab here on Livestorm. Jasmine will be also posting some questions along the way in the questions tab and also some polls. So feel free to get involved, and we'd love to speak with you about this topic. So there's a few things we've got as part of the agenda today. The topic is PI planning tools and tips. And today we've split it into 2 sections. So the first section, I'll be running you through 7 tips to make PI planning easier in this new remote world. And then following that, I'll hand over to Tegan, who will run you through how to do remote PI planning more effectively in Jira. Let's jump straight in. Tips for remote PI planning. But the first thing we need to ask ourselves, and what I've been hearing from customers, and as I've prepared some research for this webinar along the way, is people are asking, is this even possible? Is it still possible to run PI planning in a distributed or a remote environment? PI planning spent at home with your children or your pets or your partner is not quite the same as the PI planning we were used to, is it? But the answer is, thankfully, yes. Yes, it is still possible. And we know this because our customers have been running remote and distributed PI planning for quite some time now, even before COVID-19 affected us all. So yes, it's possible, but wait, there's more. There's things we need to consider now that things have changed so drastically. So today I'm going to share with you 7 tips for easier remote PI planning. And these tips aren't things that we've just brainstormed in our heads. They're things that we've actually learned from speaking to our customers and by trawling the forums, speaking to experts in the field. So I hope that you find them valuable. The first tip for easier remote PI planning is get the basics right. Well, what does that mean? What are the basics? Well, let's start off talking about communication. Communication is so important in PI planning remotely. People need to know where they need to go to access all the information they need. We need to set up chat channels, heaps of them, so that people can access support, specific support for when they need it. We need channels where product managers can talk and collaborate with each other. We need chat channels or rooms where facilitators can talk to each other both leading up to PI planning and during PI planning. And we also need a way for the teams to collaborate with each other on the day. We also need to be careful of the quiet voices. People who are extroverted during PI planning in person may no longer be comfortable speaking up if you're on Zoom or a video conferencing. So we need to be careful with that. Preparation is important. Scaled Agile actually did some research, and they found that release train engineers spent on average 6 days preparing for PI planning. Well, That was before COVID. What about after COVID? Now that everyone's working remotely, it could be even longer. So we recommend setting aside perhaps 2 weeks to adequately prepare and get your teams trained and ready for remote PI planning. Execution. Well, if we're communicating well with our people, we're well prepared, everything is set and ready to go, the execution should flow, but we need to be prepared that some things will still go wrong. Technology will fail us. People will still have problems accessing the tools that we've set up for them. Some of the tools will fail, so we need to be prepared that execution won't be seamless, but if we get the communication right, if we're prepared, then things should run smoothly on the day. Okay, tip number 2, focus on the goal. So, why are we doing this? We still need to focus on the why. The main thing for PI planning is to get alignment for our teams. If we can achieve alignment, PI planning is still a success. Let's not get too bogged down in what tools we're using, how the agenda has changed. What's really important is we're still encouraging our teams to find alignment for the upcoming increment. Tip number 3. Set the agenda as early as possible. Why is that? Well, think about your people. They're working at home, they're working with their pets or their children or their partner or their family around. If they know that PI planning is coming up and what is expected of them, then they can give the people in their house more notice that they're going to have to concentrate during these periods. And that's going to be really important to get the most out of your people during these times. Also, it might be worth spreading out PI planning. Instead of holding it over 2 days, it might be better to split it out over 3 or 4 days. And that's actually a method that Scaled Agile are recommending at the moment. Let's not cram the agenda packed full of all the events that we need to hold. Let's make sure we have enough time for breaks throughout the day, breakout sessions. Maybe it's better to have 4 half days rather than 2 full days. I'm sure you've noticed it's actually really exhausting to spend all day on Zoom or in video chats with people. All of that screen time is not healthy for us. So let's give people a chance to make this a successful event. All right, the next tip is choose your tools wisely. Decide on what tools you're going to use and make sure everyone has logged in at least once and tested each tool before PI planning starts. Now, what tools do we need? Well, here's a bit of a checklist. We're going to need video conferencing, whether it's Zooms, Microsoft Teams. We're going to need some sort of team chat capability where teams can chat with each other and also collaborate with other teams. So maybe something like Slack or Microsoft Teams. Maybe you'll need a whiteboarding function when you can brainstorm it and start collaborating with each other. You're definitely going to need a PI planning tool, somewhere where you can track your work and manage your dependencies. And of course, we suggest Easy Agile Programs for Jira is a great place to do that if you're already using Jira. There are other tools out there that might be more suitable for you. And also, you're going to need a tool to hold a retrospectives. It's really important that we're reflecting on how this process is going and if it's working well for us. Perhaps something like Confluence would be sufficient for that. Tip number 5 for easier remote PI planning is practice. We're not going to get this right the first time. We're going to have to rehearse. We're going to have to work out how do we do things like our confidence votes. Are we going to use the poll function on Zoom or are we going to use Slack? We're going to have to practice and rehearse this. We're going to have to be flexible with our agenda and understand that this is really new for people. It's very different doing it at home than it is doing it in person in a conference room or a meeting room. And it's much better to finish early than to run out of time. So let's build in some slack into the agenda. Tip number 6 for easier remote PI planning is the importance of feedback and holding the retrospective. Again, we're not going to get this right straight away. So let's give our people a chance to communicate back to us, whether it's via retrospective or open up a channel for feedback. We're not just getting feedback on how did the last PI planning session go. We're also getting feedback on how are we finding working together in this release train remotely. What's working and not working. So keep it broad, gather a lot of feedback, and we can make improvements for next time we hold PI planning. Okay, lucky last, tip number 7 for easier remote PI planning is make it accessible. There are so many factors that are going to block people from really getting value out of PI planning this time around. We've got conflicting time zones. We're going to have trouble with setting up people on new tools and getting them access to the resources they need. It's going to be great if we have tech support available all throughout PI planning. It's going to be easier for some people than it is for others, but it's important. If things go wrong, we're going to need a backup in place. We can't have 100, 200 people sitting around with nothing to do, waiting for Zoom to work or waiting for Slack to work. Your tools are going to need to be reliable, and you're going to need tech support to help fix them quickly if things go wrong. Facilitation. You're probably going to need more facilitators than you normally do to be able to answer all of these questions throughout the week of PI planning. Do your people have access to coaching? Can we get more coaching and more facilitators to help our people through this process? And training. Some people may not be used to using the tools that we're suggesting that they use. So is there training available to help them get up to speed? What's the most important one here? It's probably access. It's probably access to the tools that people are comfortable in using. And really that's why we decided to build easy agile programs for Jira. We know that scaled agile teams are already using Jira to track their work in their release training. And that's why we thought, well, why not build a tool that helps people with PI planning in Jira where they're already working? And that's a great segue now to hand over to Tegan Harbridge, our product manager at Easy Agile. She's going to walk us through, well, how do we get the most out of Easy Agile programs for Jira? How do we get the most out of PI planning in Jira when we're now working remotely? All right, Tegan, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Sean. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world and whatever time is there. We really appreciate your time, so thank you for joining us today. As Sean mentioned, my name's Tegan and I'm a product manager here at Easy Agile. So Sean touched on some of the PI planning considerations for distributed teams. And what I wanted to do is over the next 10 to 15 minutes, take you through what the execution might look like using Easy Agile programs. So full disclosure, Easy Agile Programs is an app that we created here at Easy Agile about 18 months ago. And it was really spawned out of the feedback that we were receiving from some of our enterprise story maps and roadmaps customers who were really struggling with cross-team planning and cross-team visibility inside of Jira. So we ultimately built Easy Agile programs with the goal of helping those teams scale their planning in Jira by providing a native tool, and as a way that they could get cross-team visibility and a better dependency visualization inside of Jira. So with that being said, what I'm hoping to do now is take you through some of the PI planning agenda items and what that might look like in a digital and distributed setting using programs. So things like the setting of business context, the product and the solution vision, team breakout sessions, and also those pulse checks on a weekly basis. So using a virtual program board to check in for the Scrum of Scrums and the weekly PO syncs as well. So I'm going to jump straight into a demo of programs and we're going to walk through those agenda items together. I'm just going to share my screen with you all. Okay, wonderful. So full warning for everybody on the webinar today, I'm a bit of a Harry Potter nut. So I've actually created this program based on Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. So yeah, bear with me on this one. So when we created programs in the most simplest form, a program is a collection of agile boards on a synchronized cadence. And what we're looking at here is what we call the program roadmap. And the program roadmap is a timeline that visualizes your program increments. And your program increments are represented here as these blue boxes. So you can see that I've created a PI. It's called semester 1, and we can see it on our timeline here. What we're also able to do with the program roadmap is we're able to see the features that we've committed to delivering over the course of a program increment. So you can see them on our timeline here. We can see when they're due to start, when they're due to be delivered in context of the sprints in our program increment, and also the ownership of the teams over those particular features as well. So we can see, our Gryffindor team has ownership over, features 5 and features 6. And at the top, we've also got a few shared features. So features 1 and features 2. So we require the effort of multiple teams within our program to help us to deliver on those features. And lastly, what you can see on your screen here is we're able to identify any dependencies that exist between features on our roadmap. And I'm going to touch on what the colors of those lines mean a little bit later in the demo. But that kind of brings us to PI planning agenda item number 1, which is setting of the business context. In a physical PI planning session, this might look like a business owner standing in front of a room of up to 150 members of the release train with a face-to-face kind of communication style where they might be going through a presentation, for example. So what that might look like, digitized and using Easy Agile programs, is we could embed that content in the program details section, which lives on this program roadmap page. So all members of our release train have access to this page, and this is where they can access information about the program. So I'll show you where that lives. So if we click on Edit Program, we're going to pop this dialog which shows us some of the information about our program. And as I've got a Manage Program permission, I'm able to edit this page, but members of your release train who don't have this global permission will just be able to view this in a read-only format. So you can see here that I've linked out to Dumbledore's address, and this lives in a Confluence page. And this is a really great way to provide access to maybe a more visual media, so a pre-recorded video, for example. And this is a really great way to ensure that all members of the release train are seeing your business owner kind of face-to-face in this distributed way. And that they have access to this video throughout the entirety of the PI planning session and also well into the execution of the program increment as well. So that's our first piece. If I jump back into the program roadmap, the program roadmap also offers a digital and distributed friendly way to visualize the product or the solution vision. So in a physical PI planning session, the product manager would present kind of in the same format that the business owner would present the business context, a bit of a presentation that would look at kind of a list-like form of the features that we're committed to delivering in this particular program increment. So in Easy Agile programs, how we could kind of adapt this to a digital and a distributed friendly way is that we can schedule our features on a visual timeline, and we communicate a few things to our teams by doing it this way. So we're able to communicate, what are we working on? So we can see, features 1, 2, 5, 6, 4, 3, 7, and HOG 8. These are the features that we're committed to delivering in this particular program increment. We can see pretty clearly, which teams are responsible for the delivery of these particular features, and which features do we actually require the combined effort of multiple teams within our program. We can clearly and visually communicate to our teams, when are the features expected for delivery? We're going to start HOG 5 in sprint 1, and we need it to be delivered by the end of sprint 3. And we're also able to visualize any dependencies that exist across those features. So again, we're going to jump into programs and have a look at what this looks like in action and how we actually create this timeline and present this product or solution vision to our art. So if we edit our roadmap, what we can see down the right-hand side here is our roadmap backlog. So I've actually synced this roadmap backlog with our Hogwarts program Kanban board in Jira. So all of my epics, Jira epics from that board, are being pulled into this backlog that you can see here, ready to be dragged and dropped into our team swim lanes. And we've really enhanced this experience in our latest Easy Agile Programs release 3.0 by adding the addition of these swim lanes. So we're trying to really visually communicate and enhance team ownership and visibility in this view. So in my quick filters section, and this is also an enhancement in the 3.0 release, I'm not particularly interested in seeing every feature that I have on this program Kanban board. So I'm going to select a quick filter, and I only want to view my features that have been accepted for this PI. So I've just toggled my quick filter there, and then we simply drag and drop these features onto the timeline, and we can extend their dates here to show delivery and start date. We go back to our program roadmap, we can see that we've added this particular feature here. This brings us to one of the next agenda items in PI planning, and it is without a doubt the most collaborative aspect of PI planning, one of the most important aspects of PI planning, and that's the team breakout sessions. So if I click on my Gryffindor board, it's going to take me into this. Each team will have their own dedicated kind of breakout or team planning board. So we're currently looking at the Gryffindor team planning board. And physically what this looks like is, a lot of Post-it notes up on the wall. We're asking teams to estimate their sprint capacity, so how much capacity they have sprint to sprint, and this might change if we know that people are on holidays or we have public holidays, for example, so it might vary between sprints. We want to break down the allocated features into stories. So giving the teams ownership over their features, asking them to break down that work, and then also estimate the effort for each of those stories. And then most importantly, identifying and visualizing the dependencies that exist between work that they have in their team and work on other teams in the program. And in a physical session, that's using, pieces of string or pieces of yarn up on the wall between Post-it notes. So in Easy Agile programs, teams can pretty much tackle all of those activities in their team planning or team breakout board. So each team has access to a board like this, and I'm going to walk through kind of some of the elements that you're seeing on your screen today. So at the top, we can see the sprints that live within our semester 1 program increment. And this is synced directly with the Gryffindor team's Agile board in Jira. So all of these sprints are being pulled from the team's backlog, and anything that we do on this page here is automatically synced with the board in Jira as well. We can see the capacity, so we know that this particular Gryffindor team is using story points as their method of estimation. And so we can set our sprint capacity for each sprint. Say we know someone's away in sprint 3, for example, so we would alter that sprint capacity there. The teams are also really are able to identify, what features are we responsible for looking after in this program increment. So the features that we're seeing here alter from team to team. So every team will see the features that were placed into that shared team features swim lane, and then they'll also see only the features that were scheduled into their specific team swim lane. So I remember that the first 3 of these features were scheduled into that shared team swim lane, and features 5 and feature 6 were scheduled specifically into the Gryffindor team swim lane. So it's quite easy to visually identify, where is our ownership? What are we responsible for delivering, and what features do we need to break down as a team as a part of this breakout session? Each team also has access to their backlogs. So over here on the right-hand side, this is the backlog that's being pulled directly from the Gryffindor board in Jira. And a really easy way to identify whether we've got pre-existing stories that we've created on our backlog that might be linked to any of these features is if we select a feature on the roadmap, we actually filter down our backlog to show only the stories that have been linked to that particular feature. So if I turn that off, you'll see that we see all of our stories, And if I turn it back on again, I can see that I've got, 5 stories that I need to schedule in either sprint 1 through sprint 4. And I can do that via drag and drop. So dragging and dropping these issues actually schedules them into the sprints on this team's backlog. We can create new stories on this particular view as well. So a big part of the team breakouts is actually breaking down features into stories. And a really quick way to do that in Easy Agile programs is if I know I need to break down work for feature 2, if I select this particular issue and I start creating stories, what I've actually done is I've automatically set the Jira issue link from these new stories to this particular feature. So if I turn the filter off for that feature so that I can see all of the work planned in my sprints for this PI, and then turn it back on, you'll see only the stories that contain that epic link up to that feature. Estimation, we need to estimate the effort that's going to be required to actually deliver on these stories and whether we have enough capacity within our sprints. So we can do that via inline editing. We might decide as a team that this is a 3. We might decide as a team that this is a 7. And we can see that those estimates are actually rolling up to the top here, to our capacity, and we can see how much of our capacity we've actually got allocated. And if we were to go over, so I'm going to say this is a 30, we're really easily able to identify whether we're over capacity and by how much. So one of the most powerful pieces of functionality in Easy Agile programs, and something that's a really great way for distributed teams to identify and also create dependencies, is by adding an additional team into your team planning view. And what I mean by that is in the top right, we have this teams drop down. And if I select that, we can see all of the teams that also exist within our program. So if I click on our Hufflepuff team, for example, I bring the Hufflepuff team into view. So I can see the features that the Hufflepuff team are responsible for delivering in this program increment and when the due date of those features exists. And I can also see all of the work that the Hufflepuff team have actually planned into their sprints. So it's really great to get that cross-team visibility in order to create and identify those dependencies. And creating dependencies is really simple. We've used a drag and drop method. So I'll give you an example of what that looks like. Let's say we've identified that issue 3 has a dependency on our creating story. So what I would do is I would drag issue 3 on top of the creating story, and I've created a dependency. So not only have I created this visualization that a dependency exists, I've also created a Jira issue link in the back end on the tickets as well. This visualization is really a great way to get teams to kind of shuffle work around where they have capacity. So if I was to move this creating story over into my second sprint, you'll see that I've changed the color of the dependency line there. So I wanted to just explain a little bit about what the colors of the dependencies represent. So we know that issue 3 depends on this creating story in the Gryffindor team. The reason that this dependency is showing in a yellow or orange coloured line is that there's a risk that this dependency may not be met because the issues have been scheduled in the same sprint. If I was to move our creating story into the earlier sprint, sprint 2, you can see that my line has turned green. And what that means is that, the creating story, which this issue 3 story relies on being completed, has been scheduled before we're due to start issue 3. So we're showing this as a dependency, but as a healthy dependency because we're confident that we'll be able to get the work done prior to starting on issue 3. And then the scary red, our blocker. So we've scheduled the dependent story in a sprint after we need it. And so it means that we're not going to be able to deliver on issue 3. We've got these visible dependencies filters up here as well, which give a little bit more of an explanation about what those colors mean. So if I go back to view my increment overview, just taking a little bit long to load. Technology. We've just moved a new office, so we're dealing with some networking issues. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. Okay, we seem to be having a little bit of difficulty. I was going to take you through to the final agenda item of program increment planning that we can digitize using programs, which is kind of the plan review and the confidence vote. So when this eventually loads, the plan review and confidence vote can really be utilized using the increment overview in Easy Agile programs. And the increment overview gives us a consolidated view of all of the work that our teams have planned into their sprints in their team planning board. And we get a really clear understanding of where the dependencies exist between those teams as well. Much like the dependency filter piece that I showed on the team planning board, we also have access to that in the increment overview as well. So for a release train engineer, for example, we might want to only focus on our blocker dependencies. So we would, turn the filter on to just show our red, red lines between the stories to see whether there are, a few teams that have significant blocker and at-risk dependencies. It's also a really great asset to use in our weekly Scrum of Scrums and our PO sync. So each team can present their increment overview. It's really clear to see, what was accomplished. The status color on the card will actually change when it's in an either to do, in progress, or done status. We can show and easily communicate, what is the team working on between now and the next time we sync? So what are we committing to? Here we go. Okay. So this is the increment overview. Thanks for bearing with me, everyone. So this is where we can see the teams were able to identify all of the work that they've planned in their sprints, and we can see where the dependencies exist. And so this is the dependency filter I was talking about. So if there were, a lot of healthy and at-risk dependencies, and we really wanted to only focus on those blockers, we could turn those two filters off, and we would only see our red. So we'd be able to mitigate those. So to conclude and to recap, I think what we really want to acknowledge is that we know that scaled planning is hard, and we know that distributing scaled planning is harder. So we're really committed to improving Easy Agile programs for that distributed experience, and really eager to collect feedback. So with that said, I want to hand it back over to Sean. I'm not sure if there are any questions, but happy to take questions. From all of you, and really, again, thank you for joining and bearing with me through the technical glitches. Things that we need to kind of get used to in this new and crazy time. So Sean, I'll hand it back over to you.
Great, thank you, Tegan. Thanks so much for that wonderful demo. And it's good to see that Harry Potter is still going strong in Jira. We do have a couple of questions for you, which is fantastic. But before we jump into those, I just want to quickly give our Easy Agile partners a shout out. If you are about to enter a digital transformation or you need some Agile advice, we have a lot of Easy Agile partners who are trained, they've gone through some training in Easy Agile products, and many of them are experts in the Atlassian suite and in Jira. So chances are there is a Easy Agile partner near you. So please do reach out either to us and we'll make the introduction for you, or feel free to reach out to them directly if you do need any additional help or consulting or advice for your specific configuration. All right, Tegan, let's jump into the questions. Our first question here is from Darren at FinoComp, and he is asking you, that this example that you've just used actually shows one Jira project. Can you actually include multiple projects on the one board in programs?
Awesome, thanks Darren, great question. So you can. So the Jira project that I think you're referring to was my roadmap project. So the project that I had chosen to actually pull in the features that I could schedule onto that timeline. So the answer is yes. We have a few different configuration options when starting your program. The option that you saw is I chose to select one dedicated board. That board was a single project board, but had that board been multi-project, then yes, we could have pulled in issues from across multiple projects. Another option as well is if your features don't live on a dedicated board, so we know that a lot of customers have two different use cases. A dedicated program Kanban where they, purely is at the feature level and they've got their Kanban workflow where they transition their features through that workflow. And then we also have other customers who they want to give more autonomy to the teams, and so the features actually live on each individual's team boards. So in both cases, you can configure your program to use both use cases. And so in the latter, where your features live on the team boards, that would again be pulling in issues across multiple projects. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Thanks, Tegan. We have a question here from Jeff. Jeff is a senior project manager and release train engineer at Agricorp, and he's got a few questions here. We'll take them one by one. The first one is, can you speak to the initial creation of the program and the options for what issue types are used at the feature level?
Awesome, thanks. G'day, Jeff. So you might have noticed in my demo that all of my features were Jira epics. So while that is possible, as you saw, it is also possible to select any issue type as your roadmap issue. So a lot of our customers have actually, there's a lot of confusion between terminology. So for example, a safe feature is not a Jira epic. And so there's a lot of confusion within the teams. And we've seen a lot of customers actually create a custom issue type called feature. And so in that case, customers can certainly use that custom issue type. The only thing that we ask is that you specify what the Jira issue link type between a feature and a story on the team board is, but that is certainly possible.
Great. Okay, the second question from Jeff is, what is the best practice for setting up multiple teams within Easy Agile programs? Is it better to have a Jira project with boards for each team and epics as features, or is it better to have separate Jira projects with epics and team backlogs all in those separate projects? Or maybe there's another configuration you've seen work well.
Yeah, great question again. Thanks, Jeff. Best practice, we would recommend one project per team. We've seen that seems to be the most effective way that our customers have been able to utilize Easy Agile programs. And we do have a doc around getting that set up. So I'm sure that's something we would be able to share after the webinar as well. With regards to the using epics as features, that's totally dependent on how you use those issue types in Jira today. So the majority of our customers do use Jira epics as their features, just given the native, epic linking between features and stories. But again, as I mentioned, we do have customers who've created those custom issue types. It's a little bit more legwork because you have to identify what the issue linking looks like between those custom issue types and the stories, but can definitely be used both ways. So yeah, use best practice, one project per team. And when it comes to the roadmap, epics are certainly easier because they're a native Jira primitive, but it's not always possible for teams.
Great, thanks Tegan. Robin is an analyst at Boeing, and she's asking what version is this available on? I assume that Robin means what version of Jira is programs compatible with. And do you need any specific plugins to use Easy Agile programs, or is programs, how can you get access to Easy Agile programs within Jira?
Great question. So Easy Agile programs, from memory, is compatible with Jira version 7.4.0 up until 8.9.1. We do have compatibility testing on the list of things to do for the next week or so. So I believe that's 8.11 is the most recent Jira server version. You don't need any other plugins in order to utilize any of the functionality that I showed you in programs today. It's just Jira and Easy Agile programs, and we really try and leverage as many of the existing Jira primitives as possible.
Great, and for Robin's sake, Boeing are already using Easy Agile programs within Jira, so please reach out to your Jira administrator if you'd like to have access to Easy Agile programs within your Jira instance, because they are already one of our fantastic customers. We have a question here from Patrick Coe. Patrick is a release train engineer also at Boeing Aerospace. Thanks for tuning in, Patrick. Patrick has asked that he's located in the US and he saw C Prime as a partner. So the question is, could he collaborate with C Prime on training program stakeholders?
So the answer is 100%. C Prime are one of our really good partners located in the US who are quite up to date with training and versions. So what we can do, Patrick, is we can actually give you the contact of the consultants at C Prime who are trained in Easy Agile programs, and we can get them to either you can reach out to them, or we can get them to reach out to you after the call.
Great, thanks, Tiff. Just seeing if we got any more questions here. Patrick would like to see if we can get that Jira version compatibility information again. Maybe we can send out a link for all the compatibility information.
Yeah, the compatibility information as well. It's if you head to our the Atlassian marketplace and search for Easy Agile programs, you'll be able to see the earliest Jira Server version compatibility up to the most recent Jira Server version compatibility. So yeah, after the call, but again, so 7.4.0 is the earliest Jira Server version that programs is compatible for, and 8.9.1 is the most recent server version that programs is compatible for.
Great. Robin had a follow-up question around, is Easy Agile programs available on server? The good news is, Robin, that yes, Easy Agile programs is available on cloud, server, and data center. So no matter what version of the hosting of Jira you're using, Easy Agile programs will work for you. Vasavi has a question. Vasavi asks, say we have over 2,000 Jira users, but only a couple of Agile teams. Do we have to pay for every Jira user?
Thanks for that question, and this is a question that we do as Atlassian marketplace vendors, we do get quite often. So the answer is yes. So you, the way that Atlassian licensing works for any app vendor is that you have to match the highest Jira user tier with a program's license. So as you mentioned, you've licensed Jira software for 2,000 users, so you would need to purchase a 2,000 user Easy Agile programs license. Unfortunately, that's the licensing kind of mold that we have to adhere to, and unfortunately, we don't have any flexibility on that.
Great, thanks, Tegan. We've almost come to the end of our questions. Thanks so much, everyone, for those really good questions. Lots for us to think about as well. Just reflecting on some of the polls that we asked, some of the poll questions. An interesting result. We asked, have you run a remote PI planning session with your team before? And 50% of people said yes, and 50% of people said no. Hopefully the content from today's webinar will help you run your first remote PI planning session. But of course, these tips are applicable for in-person sessions as well. So if you're lucky enough to live in a country where you can still run in-person PI planning sessions, then Easy Agile programs will also help you. And we have many customers around the world, like Boeing and Disney, who use Easy Agile programs for both distributed and in-person PI planning sessions. The other question we asked was, what has been the biggest challenge you've experienced or barriers you have to remote PI planning? 50% of people said it's about maintaining engagement remotely. That's their biggest challenge. Other people said the technical glitches. We experienced some of that today. And also preparation, making sure that everyone's prepared for the big day. Yeah, they're definitely challenges for us as well. Well, thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in to this Easy Agile webinar. The recording will be available and sent to you via email within the next 24 hours. We want to thank you for tuning in. If you do have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us at support@easyagile.com, and we'll get back to you within 24 hours for any specific questions you have. If you are interested in trying out Easy Agile programs for Jira, there is a free trial available for 30 days on the Atlassian Marketplace. Just ask your IT or your Jira administrator to install the free evaluation onto your Jira instance, and you'll be able to play around and have a look about how does this work with your data. For any future webinars, thanks for that question, Darren. We'll definitely email you if we're planning any webinars in the future. I'm sure we will, because we had great engagement today. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.